Audrey's actions when Mandy became pregnant in young Sheldon and her interactions with Georgie and Mandy's first marriage only emphasized her evil side. Nevertheless, the error was ultimately corrected in First Marriage Season 1, Episode 19. Not only did Mandy's pregnancy shortly after her young Sheldon debut threaten to ruin her and Georgie's relationship, but it also severely damaged the portrayal of the McAllisters, who were persuaded by Audrey to remove Mandy from their lives. Young Sheldon's portrayal of Audrey as evil makes logical sense given her actions after returning to Mandy's life.
Why don't you just go out and get a real job?
I made $700 yesterday.
But Season 1 of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage also demonstrated how other characters in young Sheldon and its spin-off may act in a similarly heartless manner without receiving the same kind of attention Audrey did. At the same time, First Marriage brought Audrey and Georgie together because living together unavoidably demonstrated to Audrey how nicely her relatives outside of Mandy reacted to Georgie, which encouraged her to recognize his positive traits as well. All of this softened Audrey's attitude toward Georgie and consequently how Audrey was portrayed in the show was especially clear in First Marriage Episode 19.
You know Connie?
Yep. I arrested her once. Now we go mall walking on the weekends.
Audrey's response to Jim's highlights of his gambling and how she was misrepresented. In Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Season 1, Episode 19, Jim gave the excuse that he didn't want to pay Connie his entire debt at once because Audrey would find out. Connie's most effective strategy for recovering her money was originally revealed in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 14, when Mandy assisted her in collecting a debt. Although Jim's top aim was to keep Audrey from knowing about the loss, Audrey's response was not all that different from what Connie had already anticipated, because Connie's strategy for getting her money back was to tell the spouses the truth. But Audrey didn't agree and assisted Jim. In fact, Audrey was helpful since she had managed to get Connie to back down by threatening to expose her, even if she was upset with Jim for gambling, as he had anticipated. When she read the issue correctly, she saw that Connie had already acted aggressively by notifying her and expected her to make Jim pay. Audrey played her perfectly instead, deciding not to follow through on her threat to report her to the police because doing so might have implicated Mandy as well. Audrey's response wasn't unjust, even if she was painted as the criminal who should be kept in the dark about the debt. Only Audrey is viewed as a villain, even if Mandy and Mee-Maw can be just as cruel. In Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, Audrey is not a villain, despite her actions toward Mandy and young Sheldon supporting that notion. In fact, First Marriage has shown many situations where Connie and Mandy may be equally heartless, but they are never shown as evil. It is possible to view Connie's careless actions in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage and young Sheldon as demonic, particularly given how she gladly included Georgie in her dubious transactions. Despite appearing nearly exclusively in First Marriage to intimidate debtors, Connie was viewed as quirky rather than evil. The first season of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage also focused a lot of attention on Mandy's main weakness, which is her spitefulness and her inability to accept assistance from her loved ones politely since she prefers to be independent. In First Marriage Episode 8, Georgie's success in the multi-level marketing plan she had invested in made her jealous rather than pleased that they were profitable, exposing Mandy's flaws without ever viewing her as a villain. In Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, only Mary is presented as a villain, although that is consistent with Mary's unavoidable metamorphosis in her Big Bang Theory adaptation. How the altered portrayal of the McAllisters' dynamics in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage improves it. Although Audrey was first portrayed in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage in the same unjust manner as in young Sheldon, it also became evident that she couldn't always be the antagonist as she inexorably grew closer to Georgie. This is made abundantly clear in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, Episode 19, where everyone is held accountable. Mandy for her conceit after discovering Jim's enormous debt, Jim for concealing his gambling habit from Audrey, and Audrey, who was her typical stern self around everyone but Jim. In the conclusion of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, Episode 19, Georgie's frustration with each of them encapsulated their flaws and demonstrated that no one is worse than the others. The McAllisters are instead portrayed as flawed but flawed individuals, which makes their portrayal more genuine than it would have been if Georgie and Mandy's first marriage had only one villain and the others were portrayed as incapable of making mistakes.